The hum of the environmental suits had barely faded before the first alien contingent, the Xylosian delegates, took their first unshielded breath of Terran air. Their primary olfactory sensors, usually so precise, immediately overloaded. It wasn't the sterile, processed atmosphere of their starships, nor the muted, predictable biospheres of their homeworld. This was Earth. The air itself tasted different here, thick with unfamiliar currents. A strange, almost metallic sweetness from distant flora. A sharp, clean tang of something alive and thriving. And, most prominently, that primal, inescapable odor of damp earth and ancient cook fires. It clung to everything, promising life and a wild, untamed energy. They scanned their instruments. No immediate toxins detected. Just intensity. Welcome, esteemed guests. Human Ambassador Jenkins boomed, his voice a low rumble in the small, makeshift diplomatic chamber. He gestured grandly towards a low table laden with platters. We thought for your first meal on Terra, something truly representative of our spirit. The Xylosian primary, designated Ambassador Vilek, twitched a sensory stalk. Representative of spirit? Ambassador Jenkins? Its multifaceted eyes fixed on a bowl of vibrant red liquid. Is this part of the traditional welcoming ritual? Jenkins chuckled, a sound like gravel tumbling down a hill. Indeed, a little taste of home. We call them hot wings. He slid a platter forward. The aroma, already assaulting the Xylosians' delicate senses, now intensified. It was a searing, sweet, and aggressively savory scent that made their internal filtration systems work overtime. One of the junior delegates, a curious Xylosian named Cathar, reached out a slender, manipulatory limb, hesitantly picking up a single wing. Its surface gleamed with a slick, crimson sauce. Jenkins watched, a wide grin stretching his face, the kind that might belong to a predator observing its prey. Cathar took a small, experimental bite. For a moment, nothing. Then, a shudder ran through its entire exoskeleton. Its multifaceted eyes bulged. A low gurgle, like a boiling swamp, escaped its respiratory vents. The crimson sauce, designed by humans to ignite pleasure centers, had instead tripped every single danger alarm in Cathar's biology. Its system screamed, "Fire! Toxin! Mortal threat!" The taste wasn't just spicy. It was an asterisk attack. Its body spasmed, a jerky, uncontrolled flailing that knocked over a water pitcher. "By the Great Weave!" Vlek hissed, recoiling. "What atrocity have you inflicted upon my delegate? This is an unprovoked assault. A clear violation of interspecies dietary protocols. This is a declaration of culinary war." Vilek's entire form began to pulse with an angry violet light, a clear sign of extreme distress and potential aggression in Xylosian culture. Its comm unit began to buzz furiously, reporting a diplomatic incident to its fleet orbiting above. Jenkins, meanwhile, was bent over, laughing. A deep, chesty, uncontrollable laugh that shook his shoulders. Tears welled in the corners of his eyes. "Oh, Cathar, you're fine. Just a little kick." He wiped a tear away, still chortling. "You know," he gasped out between laughs, "we've got an extra spicy version. You want to try that one next?" The Xylosian delegates stared at the human, their optical sensors struggling to process the scene. This creature, this human, had intentionally poisoned a representative, caused a planetary diplomatic incident, and was now offering more of the poison while convulsing with what appeared to be joy. The scent of damp earth and cook fires, once merely intense, now seemed to carry a sinister undertone. Humanity, they realized, was something far more bewildering and utterly deranged than any pre-contact assessment could have ever prepared them for. They had truly entered a new, terrifying world. The air still crackled with the memory of the hot wings. Ambassador Vilek's violet glow had subsided, but its optical sensors remained narrowed, fixed on Jenkins. Cathar, the unfortunate delegate, was still shuddering, gently fanned by a bewildered Xylosian medic who kept scanning for residual toxins. The human, Jenkins, however, had simply wiped tears of laughter from his eyes and beamed, seemingly oblivious to the diplomatic tightrope he was traversing. All right, Jenkins rumbled, his voice still holding a hint of amusement. Perhaps the spicy selection was a tad adventurous for a first encounter. My apologies. He swept the offending hot wings aside with a theatrical flourish, pushing forward another platter. How about something a little more subdued? More about the saucer-texture than the punch. On the platter lay what humans called scones. They were pale, crumbly-looking discs, smelling faintly of baked grain and something sweet. Beside them sat a small, golden bowl containing a viscous, sun-yellow substance. Jenkins gestured proudly. These are scones, fresh from the oven. And this, he indicated the yellow goo, is lemon curd. A classic pairing. Vilek eyed the offering with extreme suspicion. Its primary olfactory sensor twitched, detecting the sweet scent, but also a sharper, unfamiliar citrus note from the curd. The memory of the hot wings was a fresh wound. Unfaliz, subdued, the human said. Balu for a human was clearly a relative term. A different delegate, Kilosi, whose digestive system was rated slightly more resilient than Kilosi, cautiously approached the platter. With a trembling manipulator, it broke off a small piece of a scone. The texture was immediately alien. It wasn't uniform like their nutrient pastes, nor fibrous like the nutrient stalks from their home world. It was crumbly, yet dense, a dry kind of flakiness that surprised Kalok's oral sensors. It chewed slowly, processing the bland, earthy taste of the baked grain. Acceptable, it decided. A bit dry, perhaps, but not immediately hostile. Then, encouraged, Kalok dipped a tiny corner of its scone fragment into the lemon curd, following Jenkins's silent, encouraging nod. The moment the curd touched Kalok's primary taste receptors, its entire body seized, its delicate antennae retracted sharply. Its respiratory vents hissed, not with pain, but with utter shock. The sour was immediate, overwhelming, a full frontal assault on every single sweet and savory sensor. It wasn't a pleasant sour. It was a burning sour, an acidic shockwave that made its internal systems flag it as spoiled, putrid, an almost corrosive agent. Kalok dropped the scone, its limbs spasming in a bizarre dance of repulsion. Its multifaceted eyes fixed on Jenkins, wide with a new, profound horror. You consume this voluntarily?" Vlek stammered, its voice raspy with disbelief. This is not food. This is weaponry. What kind of species derives pleasure from such self-inflicted torment?" Jenkins, however, was just smiling. You prefer it sweeter, then?" he asked, a twinkle in his eye, already reaching for a plate of bright pink frosted cookies. "Don't worry, we've got plenty of options." For humans, the unknown was merely another flavor to explore, another challenge to overcome. For the Xylosians, it was rapidly becoming an existential crisis. The blast of scent hit them like a physical wall the moment Jenkins led the Xylosian delegation into the bustling terrestrial market. It was a chaotic, beautiful symphony to human noses, but to the Xylosians it was pure, unadulterated assault. Their delicate olfactory membranes, designed for subtle atmospheric analysis and pheromonal communication, seized up. The air wasn't just thick, it was a tangible, oppressive blanket woven from 1,000 screaming aromas. One moment, it was the sharp, almost metallic tang of something labeled ginger, burning its way into their sinuses. The next, a cloying, sugary sweetness, sickly to their receptors, wafting from a pile of cinnamon sticks. Then, an earthy, pungent wave, deep and primal, from sacks of cumin and turmeric. It was all mixed with the grease of frying food, the faint metallic tang of sweat, and the damp, living scent of the crowd. Vilek staggered, retracting its sensory stalks as if shielding itself from a physical blow. Cathar, still recovering from the hot wings, emitted a faint, high-pitched whine. Even Kaluk, the braver one, was visibly quivering. "Welcome," Ambassador Jenkins announced, his voice booming over the market's cheerful din. He spread his arms wide, encompassing the riot of colors and smells, as if presenting a masterpiece. "To the heart of human commerce, and this, my friends," he gestured to a particular stall, overflowing with vibrant powders and dried roots, is where the magic happens, the spice merchant. The stall was a kaleidoscopic altar to human culinary madness. Piles of crimson paprika next to ochre curry powders, dark, fragrant cloves spilling from wooden barrels, shiny black peppercorns catching the light. The sheer concentration of aroma emanating from this single stall was enough to make the Xylosians' internal biological filters redline. It was a battleground for their senses, a relentless barrage where no single scent could truly dominate, yet all collectively overwhelmed. These are the substances that cause your food to burn and sting and overwhelm? These are the son managed, its voice strained, its multifaceted eyes darting between the menacing piles of brightly colored dust. Its biomonitors were flashing warning signs. Its internal temperature was rising. This wasn't just a scent. It was a threat assessment. Jenkins picked up a handful of what looked like dried red flakes, letting them drift through his fingers. A tiny plume of invisible particulate rose into the air. "Oh, these?" He grinned, a flash of teeth that somehow seemed more feral in this chaotic environment. "These are chili flakes. A little bit of this, and you can really get a dish singing. Or screaming, depending on your preference." He sniffed the flakes deeply, a look of pure contentment on his face, as if inhaling the scent of fresh air. Cathar emitted another mournful squeak, taking an involuntary step backward. The thought of ingesting even a single particle of this volatile dust sent shivers down its chitinous spine. The human, Jenkins, was a creature of unfathomable resilience, not only tolerating this sensory inferno, but reveling in it. To them, this wasn't commerce. It was a vibrant, aggressive celebration of sensation, and humans were the fearless, perhaps foolish, masters of it all. They survived by embracing what should have incapacitated them. The Xylosian delegates, still reeling from the spice stall's aromatic assault, found themselves herded further into the human market's sprawling chaos. Just when their overstimulated sensors began to hope for reprieve, a new visceral wave crashed over them. This wasn't the burning warmth of spices, nor the cloying sweetness of baked goods. This was the cold, damp, undeniably raw scent of something recently alive. Jenkins, ever the boisterous guide, gestured enthusiastically toward a long, ice-laden counter. Arrayed upon it were creatures of the deep, their glassy eyes staring blankly upwards, scales shimmering under the market lights. Some were long and sleek, others squat and mottled. All were unnervingly still, yet radiating a primal aura. The air around them was heavy with brine, iodine, and a faint, unsettling tang of decomposition, what humans called fresh. "And here we have," Jenkins announced, a wide, genuine smile on his face, "our bounty from the sea, straight out of the ocean this morning." He reached down without hesitation, plucking a medium-sized, silver-scaled creature from the ice. Water and melting ice dripped from its slick body onto the already damp ground. The fish, still cold from its icy bed, was surprisingly heavy in his hand. Ambassador Velik, whose internal biomonitors were screaming about unsanitary conditions, recoiled sharply. Its sensory stalks flared, picking up the subtle metallic tang of blood mixed with the cold, wet scent. The sight of the human holding a dead, raw creature with such casual familiarity was deeply unsettling. Their own food processing involved sterile, enclosed environments, never such blatant exposure to unrefined biomass. You touch these cadavers?" Vilek managed, its voice tinged with genuine revulsion. "With your bare manipulators? Unprocessed? Unsealed?" Jenkins chuckled, unfazed. He gently ran his thumb along the fish's smooth, cold scales. "Cadavers? Nah, Vilek, these are just fish. Perfectly good eating, once they're cooked, of course. Or some folks even eat 'em raw. Sushi? Ever heard of it?" He offered the fish closer to the delegates, its vacant eyes seeming to stare right at Cathar. Cathar let out a soft guttural sound of distress, taking 2 rapid steps back, almost tripping over a discarded fruit rind. The cold, raw presence of the dead creature, its slippery texture visible even from a distance, was utterly repugnant. Its instinct screamed, "Danger! Unhygienic! Contamination! Jenkins, oblivious, just shrugged and set the fish back on the ice, then wiped his hand casually on a nearby cloth. "Suit yourselves," he said, a glint in his eye. "More for me, then." The Xylosians watched him, a chilling realization settling in. Humans didn't just tolerate the raw, wild, and potentially dangerous, they embraced it. They saw the primal, cold, slippery reality of a recently living thing and called it food. Their resilience wasn't just physical, it was a profound, almost terrifying comfort with the edge of existence. The Xylosian delegates, their sensory organs still reeling from the market's wild cacophony, found themselves guided by Ambassador Jenkins into what humans called a kitchen. It was a surprisingly compact space, yet it held an undeniable primal energy. A strange, metallic box hummed softly in one corner, but all attention was immediately drawn to a heavy, black circular slab of metal resting on an open flame. Then it started. A low, insistent hiss began, growing rapidly in intensity. Jenkins, with a cheerful hum, dropped several glistening pinkish strips onto the hot surface. Immediately, the hiss became a furious sizzle, punctuated by sharp, startling pops, as droplets of rendered animal fat exploded from the strips, leaping from the pan like tiny molten grenades. The air, already thick with the market's residual assault, was now saturated with a new, potent aroma, rich, savory, undeniably meaty, and somehow deeply unsettling. Ambassador Valek instinctively flinched, its sensitive auditory sensors registering the aggressive crackle as a form of uncontrolled, localized combustion. Cathar, ever the most fragile, emitted a faint shriek as a stray droplet of fat spat and landed dangerously close to its manipulatory limb. Its multifaceted eyes were wide with a combination of fear and utter bewilderment. "Ah, the sweet music of a frying pan," Jenkins declared, completely unfazed, his face bathed in the warm orange glow of the stovetop. He picked up a long, flat metal tool, casually flipping the strips of meat. The sizzling intensified, the aroma deepening, turning from merely meaty to something toasted, almost caramelized, and intensely greasy. "We call this bacon, and let me tell you, there's nothing quite like it for breakfast." Klok, the delegate who had bravely, if foolishly, tasted the lemon curd, watched the process with a growing sense of dread. The strips of meat were shriveling, darkening, transforming under the brutal heat. The fat, once solid, was now a shimmering, viscous pool, bubbling aggressively. This wasn't food preparation. This was a crude, violent act of chemical alteration, exposed and untamed. Their own food was synthesized in sterile chambers, nutrient-perfect, texture-consistent. This was barbaric. Ambassador Jenkins, Valek began, its voice tight, its internal temperature monitor now flashing a cautious yellow. "Is this controlled? The volatility of these fat explosions, they seem hazardous. And the odor, it suggests an unrefined breakdown of organic compounds, potentially releasing noxious byproducts." Jenkins merely chuckled, a deep, satisfied sound. He inhaled deeply, savoring the fragrant, smoky air. "Hazardous? Nah, just adds a little excitement. And the smell? That's flavor, Valek. The good stuff." He scooped the now crispy, golden-brown strips onto a plate, leaving the shimmering pool of hot fat in the pan. He even offered a strip to the recoiling Xylosians. The delegates stared at the charred, shrunken strips, then back at the human, who was now happily chewing. They understood, in that moment, that humanity didn't just survive the chaotic, the intense, the potentially dangerous elements of their world. They actively sought them out, transformed them with fire and iron, and consumed them with joyous abandon. Humans didn't just adapt to the wild, they invited it to dinner. The lingering, savory, greasy scent of cooked bacon still hung heavy in the kitchen air, a testament to humanity's aggressive culinary methods. The Xylosian delegates, though still on edge, had just begun to adjust their internal filters when Ambassador Jenkins, with a disconcerting smile, produced a pair of strange spherical objects. One was a pale, layered bulb, the other a smaller, segmented cluster of white cloves. "All right, my friends," Jenkins announced, a glint in his eye, that the Xylosians were learning to associate with impending sensory trauma Now for the real backbone of human flavor, the unsung heroes of almost every dish. He placed the layered bulb onto a cutting board, picked up a gleaming, sharp blade, and, with practiced ease, sliced it in half. The moment the blade cut through the onion, a potent, almost eyes-toxic wave of scent erupted. It wasn't spicy in the way the hot wings were, nor sour like the lemon curd. This was different. This was no-harried. It was a sharp, biting vapor that immediately stung the Xylosians' delicate optical sensors, causing them to water profusely. Their primary olfactory organs recoiled, detecting a complex cocktail of volatile sulfur compounds that, to their species, registered as a mild irritant, potentially corrosive. Vilek hissed, retracting its stalks. Its multifaceted eyes, already struggling to clear, blinked rapidly. Cathar, who had miraculously managed to avoid a direct hit of bacon grease, clutched its chest, a low gurgle rumbling from its internal cavities. Its respiratory systems were actively trying to filter out the pervasive, invisible irritant now permeating the air. "By the ancestors' fury!" Vilek gasped, its voice raspy. "What noxious gas have you released now, Ambassador? My ocular membranes are stinging. This is an atmospheric contaminant." Jenkins, meanwhile, was completely unfazed. His own eyes, though slightly glistening, showed no signs of distress. He chopped the onion further, releasing more of its pungent essence into the air. Then, with equal enthusiasm, he began to peel and crush the smaller white cloves, the garlic. This added another layer to the assault, a deeper, more earthy, yet equally sharp and pervasive aroma that permeated the entire chamber. It clung to their biosuits, burrowed into their sensors, an inescapable, aggressive perfume. "Gas? Nah, Vilek, that's just a little bit of onion doing its thing." Jenkins laughed, a sound that grated on the Xylosian's frazzled nerves. He held up a tiny, translucent sliver of the raw onion. "And this little guy? That's garlic!" "Wonderful for fighting off all sorts of ailments. Want a nibble?" He offered the sliver with an open palm. Cloak, despite its previous unfortunate encounters, felt a strange, morbid curiosity override its survival instincts. It extended a cautious manipulator, picked up the tiny piece, and with a swift, almost suicidal motion, placed it on its secondary taste receptor. The effect was instantaneous and violent. Cloak's entire body convulsed. Its internal systems shrieked in alarm. The cloetidoler was beyond anything it had ever experienced. A searing, raw intensity that flooded its neurological pathways with signals of asterisk danger, burn, extreme caustic agent. Its mouthfeel sensors registered not just an aggressive flavor, but a physical assault, like tiny needles pricking its delicate tissues. Cloak spat out the fragment with explosive force, its entire form vibrating with repulsion. It burns," Cloak stammered, frantically waving its manipulators in front of its mouth. "It is aggressively hostile," Jenkins just grinned, shaking his head slightly. "Oh, Cloak, you gotta get used to it. It's an acquired taste. Most things worth having are, right?" He bit into a raw onion ring himself, chewing with clear satisfaction. The Xylosians watched, utterly convinced. Humanity didn't just tolerate discomfort. The kitchen, thankfully, had been aired out. The lingering, aggressive tang of raw onion and garlic had finally begun to dissipate, leaving the Xylosian delegates slightly less on edge. Their internal systems, however, remained on high alert, anticipating the next human culinary ambush. Ambassador Jenkins, seemingly oblivious to their collective trauma, now presented them with a new offering, one that, at first glance, seemed utterly benign. It was a loaf, golden brown and steaming faintly on a wooden board. The air around it carried a gentle, almost tender aroma, the comforting scent of baked grain, warm and subtly sweet. There was no aggressive spice, no sharp acidity, no metallic tang of raw flesh, nor the pungent bite of exotic alliums. This was simply warm. It seemed almost like a peace offering, a return to something fundamental and unthreatening. "All right, my friends," Jenkins said, his voice soft, a rare moment of actual calm. He picked up a serrated knife. After all that excitement, I figured we'd try something truly simple. The bedrock of many human meals. Freshly baked bread. He sliced off a thick, irregular piece, its crust crackling gently, revealing a soft, airy interior. He offered it to Ambassador Vilek. Just plain bread. Nothing fancy. Vilek regarded the offering with extreme caution. Its olfactory sensors detected only the pleasant warmth, the inviting scent of cooked carbohydrates. No alarms. No warning signs. The texture, however, was immediately intriguing. It wasn't a solid block, nor a smooth paste. It was a complex matrix of bubbles and strands, yielding softly under its manipulator. Could this truly be safe? With a slow, deliberate movement, Vilek brought the bread to its oral aperture. It took a tentative bite. The warmth spread immediately, a genuinely pleasant sensation across its primary taste receptors. It was soft, yielding, almost dissolving, then reforming into a springy, resilient mass that required unexpected effort to process. The flavor was subtle. So subtle, in fact, that it was almost asterisk not there to the Xylosian palate, accustomed to extremes. After the violent assaults of spice, sour, and pungent raw plants, this gentle, mild blandness was, in itself, unsettling. Vilek chewed slowly, its multifaceted eyes wide with a new kind of confusion. It wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't anything. It was a ghost of a flavor, a whisper when it expected a shout. The soft, spongy texture was also an unexpected challenge for its finely tuned mandibles, designed for nutrient pastes or crisp, uniform wafers. It became a sticky, resilient mass that adhered to its internal oral structures. This is what you consider food? Vilek finally managed, its voice laced with a profound bewilderment. Its mandibles worked awkwardly, trying to clear the adhering dough. It is asterisk plain. It requires extensive mastication for so little, thin key sensation. Is it incomplete? Jenkins, however, just smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. He tore off a piece for himself, clearly enjoying the soft texture and subtle flavor. Incomplete? Nah, Vilek, it's perfect. Sometimes, the best things are the simplest. It's about the quiet comfort, the gentle satisfaction. The Xylosians exchanged glances. For humans, even, simple comfort was a complex, baffling enigma, a testament to their bewildering ability to find profound satisfaction in the utterly understated, a quality as alien as any burning spice or piercing sour. The bland, uninspired memory of the bread still clung to the Xylosian delegates' palates, a testament to humanity's baffling ability to find comfort in the flavorless. Their confusion had reached a new peak. How could a species thrive on such sensory deprivation? But then, Ambassador Jenkins, ever the architect of their gastronomical disorientation, presented the next course. He held up a wedge of something pale yellow, riddled with irregular holes. Its texture looked firm, yet somehow yielding. But it was the smell that struck first. It wasn't the fiery assault of the hot wings, nor the sharp pucker of the lemon, nor the raw sting of the onion. This was entirely different. It was a dense, complex odor, at once milky and earthy, with an undeniable, sharp pungency that hinted at something fermented. Something that, to the Xylosian bioscanners, registered as intentionally decomposed. And to go with our wonderful bread, Jenkins declared, beaming, we have a classic pairing. This is a fine-aged cheddar, perfect for cutting through the bread's simplicity. He carefully sliced a thin, irregular piece from the wedge, the knife making a faint, satisfying scrape. He then placed it on a small square of the plain bread and offered it to Ambassador Vilek. Vilek recoiled slightly, its sensory stalks twitching. The scent, though not immediately painful, was deeply unsettling. Ancient fermentu leptes implied decay. Fermented implied a controlled rotting process. Their own protocols strictly forbade the consumption of anything beyond peak freshness. This cheddar, as the human called it, violated every single one. Yet the human ate it, voluntarily, enthusiastically. Cautiously, Vilek used a manipulatory limb to pick up the piece of bread with the yellow substance on it. Its multifaceted eyes scrutinized the irregular texture of the cheese, the tiny, almost crystalline flecks visible within its surface. It sniffed hesitantly, then, bracing itself, brought it to its oral aperture. The first sensation was the familiar, gentle blandness of the bread, a fleeting comfort. But then, the cheese hit. Immediately, an explosive burst of asterisk salt flooded its taste receptors, so potent it almost vibrated through its skeletal structure. Simultaneously, a sharp, almost biting flavor, rich and profoundly savory, spread through its mouth. It wasn't spicy, but it was intense, aggressive in its richness. The texture was equally jarring, crumbly yet dense, resisting dissolution, leaving a lingering, almost oily coating on its oral membranes. This was not the smooth consistency of their nutrient pastes. This was solidified decay. Villek froze, its mandibles locked. A low, guttural growl rumbled from its chest. Its multifaceted eyes fixed on Jenkins, wide with a profound, almost cosmic horror. "By the great weave, Ambassador," it finally managed, its voice thick with revulsion, spitting out the offending morsel. This is asterisk corrupted milk. It is putrefied. It is asterisk rancid. Why would you willingly ingest something that has been permitted to asterisk spoil?" Jenkins merely chuckled, taking a bite of his own cheese-laden bread, chewing with clear satisfaction. "Spoiled? Nah, Villek, that's just flavor developing. It's called aging. Gets better with time." He offered another piece. "Want to try the one with blue bits? That's really complex." The Xylosians could only stare. Humanity didn't just tolerate discomfort. They actively cultivated it, refined processes of natural decomposition, and called it a delicacy. Their resilience wasn't just physical, it was a baffling, almost insane willingness to find pleasure in what any other species would classify as toxic spoilage. The delegates had just barely purged the last phantom notes of fermented milk from their oral sensors when Ambassador Jenkins ushered them into what he proudly declared a banquet hall. This wasn't the sterile, functional chamber of their first culinary trauma. This was a space of unapologetic human excess. Rich fabrics, warm lighting, and, at its center, a table groaning under the weight of more unfamiliar platters. But one item dominated all else, drawing every optical sensor and olfactory stalk. It was colossal. A dark, glistening mass, steaming gently, its surface a mosaic of golden brown crackle and shimmering, rendered fat. It was undeniably a large cut of animal flesh, roasted to perfection by human standards. The air around it was thick with a new, potent aroma, a deep, rich, aggressively savory scent of cooked meat and herbs, utterly overwhelming in its intensity. It wasn't spicy or sour, but it was heavy, clinging to the air, promising a density of flavor the Xylosians had never encountered. And across its surface, like a triumphant war paint, was the unmistakable greasy sheen of pure, unadulterated animal fat. Jenkins beamed, his gesture encompassing the monstrous offering. "Behold, my friends, tonight we feast. This is a slow-roasted boar shoulder, cooked for 12 hours to get that perfect, tender, fall-off-the-bone texture and a beautiful, crispy skin." He picked up a large carving knife, its blade reflecting the greasy sheen, and with a practiced hand, began to slice off generous portions. The knife sank through the crust with a soft crunch, then slid through the succulent meat with ease. Juices, glistening with melted fat, pooled on the platter. Ambassador Villek felt its internal biomonitors flash a furious red. This wasn't food. This was a monument to biological excess. The sheer volume of the fat, the unmitigated richness in the air, the sight of the dripping juices. It all screamed cardiovascular distress and metabolic overload. Their synthetic nutrient pastes were precisely calibrated for efficiency. This was the antithesis of efficiency. "Ambassador Jenkins," Villek began, its voice a strained rumble. The visible adipose tissue, the sheer quantity of what appears to be rendered lipid. Your species consumes this glistening byproduct." Jenkins just laughed, a hearty, booming sound. He forked a piece of the roasted boar, the meat practically dissolving, shimmering with fat. "Byproduct? Vlek, that's the best part. That's flavor. That's richness. You just haven't lived until you've tasted properly rendered fat." He held out a piece, perfectly cooked, rich brown, and unapologetically greasy. Kulak, the delegate who had tasted the lemon and raw garlic, hesitated. Its sensors registered the warmth, the overwhelming richness of the aroma, the dense, savory promise. Its survival instinct screamed, "Avoid." But a new, dangerous curiosity, born of observing human madness, flickered. With a deep, almost fatalistic intake of its respiratory vents, it accepted the morsel. The moment the roasted boar touched Kulak's oral receptors, its entire system was engulfed. The richness was staggering, a savory avalanche that coated every surface. The texture, impossibly tender, gave way into a greasy, unctuous explosion of flavor. It wasn't spicy, but it was heavy, a thick, clinging blanket that left a profound, almost oppressive residue. Kulak felt its internal systems protest, a strange, warm flush spreading through its core. This wasn't just taste. It was a full-body experience of overwhelming indulgence, completely alien to its biology. Kulak stared at Jenkins, a single tear of pure, unadulterated gastronomic horror forming in one of its multifaceted eyes. "It is too much," it whispered, its voice weak. "It is pure, unmitigated excess." Jenkins, completely unfazed, just grinned, already reaching for another slice. "Too much? Nonsense. You're just getting started." The banquet hall, still thick with the opulent scent of roasted boar, hadn't yet released the Xylosian delegates from humanity's peculiar culinary grip. Kulak, still wrestling with the lingering greasy richness of the meat, felt a strange, almost queasy warmth in its core. Ambassador Vilek had withdrawn to a safe distance, furiously transmitting diagnostic reports to its orbiting vessel. But Ambassador Jenkins, his eyes alight with a mischievous glee the Xylosians now recognized as a precursor to sensory torment, hadn't finished his feast. He presented a new platter. On it lay thin, glistening strips, impossibly dark and shiny, almost like polished obsidian. The scent that wafted from them was utterly bewildering. It was undeniably the deep, smoky, savory aroma of the bacon they had witnessed being violently cooked earlier. But beneath that familiar, meaty richness, there was a saccharine, syrupy sweetness, cloying and almost artificial to their refined olfactory organs. It was a contradiction in every breath. "Now, this," Killer Jenkins announced, holding up one of the strips, which bent slightly but retained a crisp rigidity, "is a true stroke of human genius. Candied bacon? We take the salty, smoky goodness, and then we add sugar. Lots of it." He popped a piece into his mouth, crunching audibly, a look of sublime pleasure spreading across his face. Vilek stared, its multifaceted eyes wide with a fresh wave of incomprehension. "You intentionally combine the bacon, the aggressively savory, lipid-rich substance, with pure sucrose? This is a fundamental violation of all logical culinary categorization. It is an incongruity." Cathar, who had been trying to silently process the roasted boar, emitted a small whimper, clutching its head. The very trine idea of mixing such diametrically opposed flavors sent its internal logic circuits into a cascade failure. But Kulak, whose curiosity was now a self-destructive force, felt an irresistible pull. Its sensory stalks flared, picking up the insistent, conflicting aromas. It was a paradox made edible. With a heavy sigh, a sound almost akin to resignation, Kulak accepted a strip from Jenkins. It took a small bite. Immediately, a shockwave of flavor exploded across its primary taste receptors. The initial burst was a rush of intensely sweet, almost caramelized sugar, coating its oral membranes. Then, almost instantly, the powerful, salty, smoky, fatty essence of the bacon slammed into it, creating a jarring, disorienting clash. Its entire system reeled. Sweet. No. Salty. No. Sweet again. But also savory. But overwhelmingly sweet. It was an utterly illogical sensory experience, a chaotic symphony of opposing notes that refused to harmonize. Its brain struggled to categorize it, to even understand it. Cloak dropped the candied bacon, its manipulators trembling. Its multifaceted eyes locked onto Jenkins, no longer with fear or revulsion, but with a dawning, terrifying clarity. You enjoy this internal conflict? It rasped, its voice hollow. You seek out these paradoxes of taste? It is asterisk insane. Jenkins simply grinned. A wide, utterly human grin, taking another bite of his own candied bacon. Insane. Nah, Kalak, it's just interesting. It keeps things exciting, you know? Never a dull moment with human food. For humanity, life itself was a glorious, contradictory mess, and their food was merely a delicious reflection of that beautiful chaos. They didn't just survive extremes, they made art out of them. The Xylosian delegation had endured the full spectrum of human culinary madness. They had survived spice, sour, excessive sweetness, putrefied milk, and the baffling paradox of candied meat. Their internal biomonitors were screaming, their logic circuits frayed. Ambassador Valek had formally lodged no less than 3 diplomatic protests, each met with Ambassador Jenkins' disarming, infuriating laughter. Now, as the remnants of the banquet were cleared, Jenkins approached with a new offering, one that shimmered ominously in a small ornate glass. It was a liquid, perfectly clear and still, reflecting the soft light of the hall. No bubbles, no discernible particles. It looked innocent, harmless. But as Jenkins poured it into tiny, delicate vessels, a sharp, volatile aroma diffused into the air. It wasn't the earthy scent of their own nutrient broths, nor the sweet fermented tang of fruit juices. This was buchu, nazgasti rival, acrid. It bit at their olfactory sensors with a clean, almost sterile intensity, yet it carried an underlying warmth, a hint of something potent and unsettling. "All right, my friends," Jenkins announced, holding up one of the small glasses, the clear liquid swirling. "To properly conclude our feast, a traditional human digestive. This, my friends, is called vodka. It's a distilled spirit, goes down smooth, warms you right up." He tossed back his own glass with a casual flick of the wrist, a satisfied sigh escaping his lips. Valek stared at the small vessel with profound suspicion. Its biomonitors were now flashing warnings about high ethanol content. Any 20-20-20-20-20 botsanol, a known solvent, a disinfectant, a mild neurotoxin in concentrated forms. And the human was drinking it? Voluntarily? "Ambassador Jenkins," Valek rumbled, its voice strained, "you propose we ingest a purified alcohol? This is a potent solvent designed to dissolve organic compounds. It is not a nutrient source. It is a toxic agent." Jenkins just chuckled. "Toxic? Nah, Valek, it's just strong, builds character." He gestured for Kalok, who, despite its past traumas, was once again compelled by a perverse, alien fascination. Kalok, with a fatalistic resolve, carefully lifted the glass. The sharp, clean scent prickled its nasal analogues. It took a minuscule, experimental sip. The effect was instantaneous and violent. It wasn't a taste. It was a burn. A fiery trail scorched its oral membranes, then spread rapidly down its gullet, a searing internal heat that sent its entire nervous system into shock. Its internal temperature spiked. Its biomonitors shrieked. Its multifaceted eyes bulged. The clear liquid, which had seemed so innocuous, was pure, unadulterated fire, igniting every alarm in its biology. Kalok dropped the glass with a clatter, its entire form convulsing, its respiratory vents hissing erratically. It burns!" it shrieked, clawing at its throat. "It is internal combustion. You consume fire." Jenkins doubled over with laughter, wiped tears from his eyes. "Oh, Kalok, you're fine. Just a little kick. You know," he wheezed, still laughing. "We've got some stuff that's even stronger. Aged whiskey tequila. You want to try the extra proof version?" The Xylosians could only stare, their faces etched with horror and utter bewilderment. Humanity didn't just consume discomfort. They distilled it, bottled it, and drank it for pleasure. They didn't just walk the line of danger. They chugged it down, felt the burn, and asked for another. Their resilience wasn't just to food, but to the deliberate, controlled poisoning of their own systems. Humans were truly, utterly mad. The Xylosian delegates were still collectively dousing the lingering internal fire of the vodka. Kalok, in particular, was fanning its respiratory vents. its multifaceted eyes still wide with the shock of internal combustion. Ambassador Villek had updated its diplomatic log with a new entry: human recreational solvents, extreme hazardous consumption risk. Yet Ambassador Jenkins, ever the relentless host, simply smiled, a glint in his eye that promised yet another peculiar human delight. He presented a new set of small, delicate glasses. This time, the liquid within was not clear, but a rich, warm amber, almost golden, glistening with an undeniable syrupy thickness. As he poured, the air filled with a new, potent aroma. It wasn't the sharp, clean burn of the vodka. This was something else entirely. This was a deep, cloying sweetness, thick and heavy, like liquid sunshine distilled into pure saccharine intensity. It carried a faint, floral note, mixed with an underlying tang of fermentation, making it utterly overwhelming to the Xylosians' sensitive olfactory organs. It promised indulgence, yes, but an indulgence so profound it bordered on the suffocating. And for our truly sweet-toothed guests, Jenkins announced, holding up a glass, the amber liquid clinging to the sides. This is a traditional human drink, going back millennia, made from fermented honey. We call it mead. Sweet, smooth, and perfect for a cozy evening. He took a slow, appreciative sip, his eyes closing in apparent bliss. Villek stared at the offering, its internal biomonitors struggling to reconcile the data. New fauve fermented. Another intentional corruption of natural compounds. But this time the primary concern was not volatility, but the sheer, aggressive sweetness. Its systems flagged the potential for immediate sugar shock, a metabolic nightmare. Ambassador Jenkins, Villek rumbled, its voice tight. You offer us another fermented liquid? And the aroma. It suggests a sugar concentration that would be medically inadvisable for any known carbon-based life form. It is a saccharine assault. Cathar, who had been hiding behind Villek, whimpered softly, the cloying scent making its mandibles ache. But Kalak, having endured the fire, the sour, the pungent, and the greasy, found itself drawn by an almost masochistic curiosity. It had to know the full extent of human madness. With a grimace of resignation, it accepted the glass. It took the smallest, most infinitesimal sip. The effect was immediate and profound. Its entire oral cavity was instantly coated in a thick, viscous, utterly overwhelming sweetness. It wasn't merely sweet, it was asterisk, the essence of sweetness concentrated ghouls, a syrupy explosion that clung to every taste bud, refusing to dissipate. It was sticky, cloying, almost choking in its intensity, and beneath it all, that faint, deceptive alcoholic warmth. Its internal systems screamed, "Alert! Sugar overload!" Immediate fluid flush required. It was like being drowned in pure, undiluted confectionery. Kaluk dropped the glass, its manipulators trembling, its mouthparts spasming in a futile attempt to dislodge the clinging sweetness. It felt a strange, nauseous flush, not of burning, but of pure, sugary revulsion. It is asterisk too sweet. Kaluk gasped, its voice thick with something akin to despair. It is the nectar of 1,000 sugar demons. It is poisonous syrup. Jenkins, however, was roaring with laughter again, wiping tears from his eyes. Poisonous syrup? Oh, Kaluk, you're hilarious. That's just good, wholesome sweetness, you know? He wheezed between laughs. Some cultures even add more sugar to their desserts. You want to try a truly rich chocolate fudge next? The Xylosians could only stare. Humanity didn't just walk the tightrope of pleasure and pain. They reveled in the most extreme versions of both, often simultaneously, proving that their true resilience lay in their baffling, joyous embrace of sensory excess. The Xylosian delegates, their internal systems still attempting to purge the lingering, cloying sweetness of the mead and the searing memory of the vodka, could only stare. Their multifaceted eyes were wide, their sensory stalks retracted in a posture of profound resignation. Ambassador Jenkins, however, was already back, his smile unsettlingly cheerful, bearing a small plate. On it rested what humans called gingerbread cookies. They were brown, irregularly shaped discs, faintly spiced, but their most striking feature was the liberal coating of something white and crystalline. They shimmered under the light, each individual granule visible, almost sparkling. The air around them was thick, with a new, aggressive sweetness, drier than the mead, but still potent, mixed with a hint of warm, earthy spice. "All right, my brave explorers," Jenkins announced, holding up one of the cookies, its crystalline surface catching the light. "For those who enjoy a bit of texture with their sweetness, these are fresh out of the oven, sprinkled with raw sugar. That's why you get that lovely little crunch." He took a hearty bite, the sound of the cookie yielding under his teeth surprisingly loud in the hushed hall. Ambassador Vilek, whose diplomatic protests were now being filed on a rolling basis, twitched a sensory stalk. 9 raw sugar, 9 raw. 9 raw. The term itself was horrifying. Their own synthesized sweeteners were uniformly dissolved, integrated perfectly into nutrient slurries. The idea of *unrefined abrasive crystals as a food additive was bewilderingly primitive. "Ambassador Jenkins," Vilek rumbled, its voice strained, "you propose we willingly ingest undissolved particulate? The crystalline structure will surely cause microabrasions to our delicate oral membranes. And the sweetness, it radiates with a density that is metabolically dangerous." Kolok, who had bravely or foolishly volunteered for most of the previous trials, found itself once again drawn into Jenkins's orbit. Its curiosity, now intertwined with a morbid fascination with human self-inflicted torment, compelled it forward. With an almost imperceptible shudder, Kolok took one of the cookies. It sniffed it cautiously, detecting the aggressive sweetness and the subtle spice. Then, with a deep intake of its respiratory vents, it took a small bite. The initial impact was an explosion of intense sweetness, immediately coating every receptor, but it was swiftly overshadowed by the texture slate. The coarse, unrefined sugar crystals were everywhere, grinding against its oral structures, 1,000 tiny, gritty points. It wasn't a smooth crunch like a crisp wafer. It was an abrasive, granular sensation, like chewing on finely crushed rock. Its mandibles protested, feeling the unfamiliar, uneven resistance. Its internal systems registered the sensation as chewing illusion. Kolok froze, its multifaceted eyes bulging with a new kind of horror. It tried to chew, but each movement brought more of that gritty, abrasive friction, accompanied by a relentless wave of sugar shock. It felt like its mouth was being scoured. This is sand." Kolok finally gasped, spitting out the cookie fragment, its voice raspy with utter disbelief and profound discomfort. "You consume sugared gravel. Why would you intentionally damage your oral structures with such abrasive sweetness? This is beyond logic. This is self-mutilation." Jenkins, doubled over in uncontrollable laughter, wiped tears from his eyes. "Sand? Oh, Kolok, you're too much. That's just a bit of texture. Adds character, right? You know." He wheezed, still chuckling. "We've got some really coarse-grained stuff, almost like rock candy. You want to try a piece of that?" The Xylotians could only stare. Humanity didn't just embrace pain and discomfort. They packaged it, coated it in sugar, and found a perverse joy in the grit and grind of it all. Their resilience wasn't just physical. The gritty, saccharine memory of the raw sugared gingerbread still abraded the Xylotian delegates' oral membranes. Their systems were in full rebellion, reeling from a succession of escalating sensory assaults. Ambassador Vilek had resorted to continuously flushing its internal filtration systems, while Cathar had taken refuge in the corner, gently quivering. Yet Ambassador Jenkins, utterly unperturbed by the existential crisis he was inducing, approached with a final, almost ethereal offering. He held a small crystal dish. Within it lay tiny, delicate objects, vibrant purple, almost translucent, each one coated in a fine, shimmering layer of sugar. They looked like miniature jewels, deceptively beautiful. But the aroma that emanated from them was perhaps the most confounding yet. It was undeniably sweet, a pure, intense sugariness, yet interwoven with it was a distinct, utterly overpowering floral perfume. It was the scent of blossoms, concentrated and weaponized, mixed with the cloying intensity of pure sucrose. And to cap off our delightful culinary journey, Jenkins announced, his voice filled with a strange, almost reverent pride, "I present to you candied violets. Delicately preserved blossoms coated in sugar. A true taste of spring. He popped one into his mouth, his eyes closing in what appeared to be pure ecstasy. Ambassador Vilek felt its primary optical sensors narrow to mere slits. Its internal diagnostic systems were now displaying error messages it had never before encountered. Floral matter, .com sweetener, .com sour tum sword, .com sword, .com sour tum, .com sword, .com sword, .com sword, .com sort, .com sword, .com sword, .com sword, .com sword, .com sword. These gone his blow, .com sword, .com sword, .com sword, .com sword. Ambassador Jenkins. Vilek rumbled, its voice barely a whisper, a tone usually reserved for contemplating cosmic horrors. You consume flowers? And you coat them in more of that aggressive sugar? This is beyond metabolic logic. This is an aesthetic obscenity. Cathar emitted a pained gurgle from its respiratory vents, covering its multifaceted eyes with its manipulators. The scent alone was enough, but Kulok, whose journey had transformed its initial curiosity into a grim, almost scientific determination to fully map the terrifying landscape of human culinary preferences, felt a perverse obligation. It was the last frontier. It extended a trembling manipulator and accepted a candied violet. It was impossibly small, delicate, yet strangely rigid with its sugar coating. Claude brought it to its oral aperture, taking the smallest, most infinitesimal nibble. The effect was cataclysmic. An immediate, searing burst of pure, unadulterated sweetness flooded its entire oral cavity, almost physically painful in its intensity. But simultaneously, the full, concentrated perfume of the violet erupted, overwhelming every taste receptor. It was like ingesting a highly concentrated air freshener, a cloying, chemical floral essence that felt utterly alien and fundamentally wrong on its palate. Its brain struggled to process the contradiction, a food item that tasted like something meant only to be *smelled. The delicate crunch of the sugar, followed by the soft, waxy texture of the flour, only added to the profound disorientation. Clog dropped the candied violet, its entire form spasming, its manipulators flying to its mouth. Its multifaceted eyes were wide, not with fear or revulsion, but with a dawning, terrifying awe. It is asterisk inedible fragrance, Clock rasped, a sound of utter defeat escaping its vents. It is disgustingly beautiful. You find pleasure in consuming the very essence of perfume itself? This is true madness. Jenkins merely beamed, a wide, utterly human smile completely oblivious to the depths of alien despair he had wrought. Madness? Nah, Kalak. It's just unique. It's about experiencing everything. And hey, he winked, we've got candied rose petals too, if you want something even more aromatic. The final, cloying perfume of candied violets still clung to the air, an invisible shroud of saccharine horror. The Xylosian delegates, however, had moved beyond mere sensory bewilderment. Now, a new, far more primal distress was taking root. It began subtly, a faint internal gurgle deep within Clock's digestive tract. Then another, louder. It was a sound entirely alien to their meticulously regulated systems. A chaotic symphony of protest from organs overwhelmed and utterly confused. Clo clutched its abdomen, its multifaceted eyes wide and unfocused. A strange, unfamiliar pressure built behind its sternum, radiating outwards in an unsettling wave. Its internal biomonitors were screaming, a chaotic jumble of red alerts, acidic pH imbalance, high sugar concentration, unidentified lipid saturation, capsaicin residue detected. The hot wings, the sour lemon, the sweet mead, the greasy boar, the abrasive sugar, the burning alcohol. They weren't just tastes anymore. They were a rebellion within. Ambassador Vilek, observing Kalok's distress, felt a similar, though less acute, internal churning. Its own digestive tract, while more robust than Cathar's, was now staging its own quiet protest, a low, ominous rumble that echoed the unsettling gurgles emanating from its delegate. Its respiratory vents, still trying to clear the aromatic residue of raw onion and candied violets, now struggled with an acrid, almost sulfurous backflow from within. "Kalak, are you experiencing a systemic failure?" Valek asked, its voice laced with genuine concern, its violet glow returning, but this time with worry instead of anger. "Your internal diagnostics indicate extreme discomfort." Cloak doubled over, a soft, involuntary groan escaping its vents. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated internal misery, the likes of which it had never known. Its body felt heavy, bloated, yet simultaneously burning in a dozen different conflicting ways. The heat from the hot wings had reactivated, a phantom fire deep in its gut. The sour from the lemon curd still gnawed. The excessive sugar from the mead and candies had created a thick, syrupy malaise. Its biology, accustomed to efficient, uniform nutrient absorption, was in complete disarray. Ambassador Jenkins, however, was merely watching with a familiar, amused expression. He leaned forward slightly, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. "Feeling a little full, Cloak? Bit of an upset stomach?" He even offered a glass of clear, fizzing liquid. "Here, try this. It's called soda. Might help settle things." Or, he winked, "maybe a bit more spice to kick it all through?" Kalak stared at the human, then at the fizzing liquid, then back at Jenkins. The human had offered them poison, then more poison, then remedies that were, to their understanding, also forms of slow poison. Humanity didn't just eat dangerously. They felt the consequences and kept going. Their resilience wasn't just to the initial assault, but to the painful, chaotic aftershocks, treating it all as merely a bit of an upset. They thrived on internal rebellion. Kalak's internal gurgling, a cacophony of biological protest, intensified. It wasn't just discomfort now, it was a full-blown mutiny. Its multifaceted eyes, once wide with bewilderment, were now glazed over, fixed on some unseen internal horizon of pain. A strange, shimmering film began to spread across its exoskeleton, a clear, viscous secretion that rapidly cooled upon contact with the air. It was the xylosine equivalent of a cold sweat, a visible manifestation of systemic distress, a silent scream from its overtaxed physiology. Ambassador Vilek, its violet glow now a frantic pulsing alarm, rushed to Clock's side. Its manipulatory limbs hovered, scanning the delegate with emergency diagnostic tools. The readouts flickered wildly. Core temperature destabilization, enzyme cascade failure, neural pathway overload, toxin levels, unclassifiable. The accumulated onslaught of capsaicin, acetic acid, high fructose, complex lipids, abrasive crystals, and raw ethanol had finally pushed Kalak's finely tuned biology past its breaking point. A low, pained moan, unlike any sound Vilek had ever heard from a Zaloshan, escaped Kalak's vents. Its limbs spasmed, twitching uncontrollably as its internal organs waged war against the alien invaders. It pressed its manipulators against its abdomen, a gesture of desperate, universal pain. The cold sweat intensified, dripping onto the floor, a testament to the biological miscalculation of ever-trusting human cuisine. "By the great weave, Kalak!" Vilek hissed, its voice thick with genuine alarm. "Your vital signs are collapsing. This is asterisk critical. Ambassador Jenkins, what have you done? My delegate is experiencing acute multi-organ system distress." Jenkins, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mild, almost detached interest, merely shrugged. He walked over, a bottle of clear, sparkling water in his hand, and offered it to the convulsing Kalak. "Whoa there, buddy. Just a bit of a rough patch. Happens to the best of us after a good feast, eh? Here, drink this. Or, hey," he added, a mischievous glint returning to his eyes, "maybe a strong black coffee would perk you right up. Gets the system moving." The Xylosians could only stare, their minds shattered. Kalak was clearly on the verge of biological collapse, and the human offered more stimulants. They had witnessed humanity's casual disregard for their own physical well-being, their embrace of pain and discomfort, but to see it manifest so vividly in Kalak, and to see Jenkins's blithe reaction, was truly terrifying. Humans didn't just endure, they reveled in the brink, pushing their bodies, and now alien bodies, to the absolute edge, then shrugging it off. Their resilience wasn't just a trait, it was a biological weapon. and the Xylosians for the first time truly feared it. Kalok lay prone, its multifaceted eyes dull, its entire form shivering uncontrollably despite the warm ambient temperature. The cold sweat of biological miscalculation still glistened on its exoskeleton, and the internal gurgling within its abdomen had escalated to a rhythmic, painful churn. Ambassador Vilek, having exhausted its native medical diagnostics, was frantically attempting to interface with the Terran medical network, but the complexity of human biology, let alone human Cuisine-induced trauma, was proving impenetrable. Then Ambassador Jenkins appeared, a look of concerned, but strangely amused, paternalism on his face. In his hand, he carried a steaming mug, from which wafted a new, utterly bewildering aroma. It wasn't sweet, spicy, sour, or even overtly savory. This was bitter. Deeply, fundamentally bitter, with an earthy, almost muddy undertone that suggested decaying roots and desiccated leaves. It was the scent of unpleasantness, intentionally brewed. "All right, Clock, old buddy," Jenkins said, his voice softer, but still carrying that disarming human cheer. "Looks like your system's a bit out of whack. Happens to the best of us after a good exploration. But don't you worry. We humans have been dealing with upset stomachs for millennia. I've got just the thing for you." He held out the steaming mug. Vilek looked at the concoction with extreme suspicion. The liquid was murky, a dark, unsettling brown, and emitted that pervasive, bitter smell. "Ambassador Jenkins," Vilek began, its violet glow now muted by sheer exhaustion. "You propose another ingested liquid? This emits an aroma of deliberate toxicity. It is intensely bitter. Is this another one of your remedies?" Jenkins nodded, a confident smile on his face. "You bet. This is ginger tea. Full of good stuff to settle the stomach. Might taste a little earthy, but it's good for you. Builds up your tolerance." He held it out to the ailing Kalok. Kalok, too weak to refuse, too desperate for any reprieve, lifted its head slightly. Its multifaceted eyes registered the murky liquid, its olfactory sensors recoiling from the bitter scent. But the human's insistence, his unwavering confidence, held a strange, hypnotic power. With a final, desperate gasp, Kalok took a tiny sip. The effect was not the violent fire of vodka, nor the saccharine suffocation of mead. This was a slow, creeping invasion. The bitterness was immediate and overwhelming, coating every taste receptor, clinging to its oral membranes with tenacious grip. It was aggressive, profoundly unpleasant, yet oddly inert, refusing to offer any secondary flavors. It just was bitter. Then, a faint, familiar warmth, the ghost of the hot wings, began to spread. A gentle internal burn that somehow felt less hostile, more purposeful, but still, undeniably, bitter. And beneath it all, that earthy, almost soil-like taste. It wasn't a cure. It felt like another form of penance. Kalok shuddered, spitting out the remainder of the tea, its entire form vibrating with a new kind of misery. It is asterix vile," it rasped, its voice hollow. "It is the taste of desiccated roots. You intentionally consume this bitter punishment to achieve what? Further suffering?" Jenkins, however, merely nodded, a slight, knowing smile playing on his lips. "See? It's working. That means it's doing its job. Sometimes, the best medicine doesn't taste good, Kalok. Sometimes, you just gotta power through the rough stuff to get to the good stuff." The Xylosians watched, utterly broken. Humans didn't just embrace discomfort in their pleasure, they embraced it in their healing. They found a strange, defiant virtue in enduring the vile, believing that the path to wellness lay through further, deliberate unpleasantness. Their resilience wasn't just to the world, it was to themselves. Kalok's entire form was still racked with shivers, a faint, internal tremor responding to the recent bitter assault of the ginger tea. Its multifaceted eyes were half-lidded, dull with exhaustion and biological revolt. Ambassador Vilek, now convinced that direct Terran medical intervention was necessary, was still struggling to transmit distress codes. But the human ambassador had, once again, proven himself surprisingly persistent in his unorthodox care. Jenkins knelt beside the ailing Kluk, his expression a strange mix of genuine empathy and an almost clinical amusement. In his hands, he held a simple earthenware bowl, from which rose a faint wisp of steam. The liquid within was a pale, translucent gold, almost clear. The aroma was subtle, perhaps the most subdued scent Kalak had encountered since its first unshielded breath of Terran air. It was a faint, savory warmth, a whisper of cooked herbs, and something deeply, mildly meaty. No sharp spice, no acrid bite, no cloying sweetness. Just a gentle, unassuming warmth. "All right, Kaluk," Jenkins murmured, his voice unusually soft, devoid of his usual boisterous cheer. "You've been through the ringer. So for this we go back to basics. This is chicken broth. It's what we humans give each other when we're feeling under the weather. It's warm, it's nourishing, and it's about as gentle as human food gets." He held the bowl out, a small, polished spoon resting on its rim. Vilek approached cautiously, its sensory stalks flaring. The aroma was indeed mild, almost imperceptible compared to the previous bombardments. But the consistency was alarming. It was unnervingly smooth, utterly without texture or particulate, a uniform, almost gel-like liquid that swirled gently in the bowl. It lacked the fibrous integrity of natural foods, yet also the sterility of synthetic pastes. It was a liminal substance, unsettling in its very blandness. "Ambassador Jenkins," Vilek rumbled, its violet glow now almost non-existent. This is merely flavored water. It is devoid of structure, devoid of significant nutrient density. After the caloric extremes you have already inflicted, you propose this void." Kalok, however, was past questioning. Its internal systems were screaming for anything, Kostrine, anything, that would not further assault them. With a weak tremor, it reached out, accepting the spoon. The warmth of the liquid, even through the spoon, was a small comfort. It brought the spoon to its oral aperture, taking a cautious, desperate sip. The effect was entirely unexpected. After the fire, the sour, the grit, the overwhelming sweetness, the raw bite, the greasy excess, and the bitter medicine, this was nothing. Almost. It was a wave of pure, mild warmth, spreading through its oral cavity, down its gullet, and settling into its protesting stomach. The flavor was so incredibly subtle, a ghost of savory comfort, a hint of something restorative, that it was, in its very lack of aggression, profoundly unsettling. The smoothness was absolute, a liquid silk that offered no resistance, no challenge, nothing to grapple with. It was the absence of everything Kluk had come to associate with human food. Kluk swallowed, a single clear tear of utter confusion rolling down its exoskeleton. "It is asterisk nothing," it whispered, its voice weak, hollow. "It is unoffensive, it is boring. But my internal systems, they are calming." It looked at Jenkins, a dawning, terrifying realization in its multifaceted eyes. Jenkins merely smiled, a genuine, gentle smile this time, utterly without malice. "See? Sometimes, Kalak, that's exactly what you need. Just a bit of quiet. A reset." The Xylosians could only stare. Humanity didn't just endure the extremes. They navigated them, pushing their bodies to the brink, then knowing instinctively how to guide themselves back with deceptive simplicity. The soft, unassuming warmth of the medicinal broth had indeed quelled the worst of Kalak's internal revolt. But it had done nothing to erase the phantom feast still raging on its palate and in its olfactory sensors. Even hours later, long after Ambassador Jenkins had finally departed, leaving the Xylosian delegates in the sterile, air-filtered quiet of their quarters, Kalak found no true peace. Its internal systems hummed a low, exhausted thrum, but its taste receptors were in a state of continuous phantom bombardment. It tried to sip purified nutrient water from its emergency dispenser. But the moment the bland liquid touched its oral aperture, the ghost of the past returned. A sharp, almost biting saltiness exploded across its tongue, followed by a deep, smoky undertone that seemed to coat its throat with an invisible char. It was the phantom echo of the aged cheddar, the roasted boar, the aggressively salted bacon, all of it resurrected in the harmless water. Cloak recoiled, gagging faintly, spilling the water onto its manipulatory limb. Ambassador Valek, still meticulously documenting Cloak's physiological responses, watched with growing alarm. Its own primary olfactory sensor, though less traumatized, still picked up faint, disturbing traces of human food in the otherwise pristine air. A lingering sweetness, thick and cloying like the mead, would suddenly intermingle with the acrid memory of raw onion, then shift to the faint, metallic tang of the raw fish. "Kelok," Valek rumbled, its voice laced with a new, unsettling weariness. "Your neurological pathways are still registering phantom stimuli. The human cuisine has imprinted itself upon your very essence. Are you permanently altered?" Cloak shook its head weakly, a low, pained gurgle rumbling from its abdomen. It tried to breathe deeply, to clear the lingering, ghostly aromas, but the air itself seemed to carry the memory of fried fat and concentrated spices. Its perception of reality, once so clear and predictable, was now fractured by these persistent, insidious echoes of human flavor. The very environment seemed tainted. Suddenly a voice, surprisingly cheerful, buzzed through their comm unit. It was Jenkins. "Hey guys, just checking in. How's Kalak doing? Any lingering sensations? Don't worry, it's totally normal. Means you really experienced it. Makes you stronger, builds character, right?" Kalak whimpered, pressing its manipulators to its temples. Stronger? Character? It was enduring an internal war, a never-ending siege of salt and smoke and sweet and sour. Humanity didn't just offer food. They offered an asterisk experience, so potent, so overwhelming, that it carved itself into the very fabric of one's being. They didn't just eat. They left an indelible mark, reminding the universe that to truly encounter humanity was to be forever changed by its unpredictable, indelible essence. The Xylosian mothership hung silent and vast in orbit, a testament to order in meticulously controlled environments. Within its medical bay, Kalok lay on a diagnostic couch, its multifaceted eyes closed, its breath shallow but steady. The cold sweat was gone, the gurgling had subsided, and its biomonitors now displayed a precarious stability. The air, painstakingly filtered to pristine sterility, bore no trace of Earth's chaotic aromas. Yet, for Kalok, and even for Ambassador Volek, the phantom feast raged on. Kalok twitched, a faint shudder running through its exoskeleton. In its mind's eye, the burning rush of the hot wings still ignited, only to be immediately suffocated by the thick, cloying sweetness of the candied violets. A sharp, abrasive grit, the ghost of raw sugar, scraped against its phantom oral membranes, followed by the deep, earthy bitterness of the ginger tea, clinging like mud. It was a relentless, internal assault, a chaotic symphony of flavors that refused to fade, even in the absence of actual food. Ambassador Valek stood nearby, observing Kalok's restless sleep. Its own primary olfactory sensor, though less traumatized, still suffered its own persistent echoes. A metallic tang of raw fish, a pungent wave of garlic and onion, the heavy richness of roasted fat. They would appear unbidden, dissolving the sterile calm of the medical bay into fleeting, unsettling images of Earth. The human cuisine had not merely been consumed, it had been imprinted. The human Jenkins reported Kalok's condition as a good cleanse. Valek murmured, its voice a low rumble, breaking the silence. Its multifaceted eyes were fixed on the unconscious delegate. He suggested that, sometimes, you need to feel it to truly appreciate it. The medical data suggests otherwise. Complete systemic overload. Yet, the organism persists. Kalok groaned softly, its manipulators twitching as if still batting away invisible chili flakes. It opened its eyes, focusing on Valek with a profound, almost weary understanding. Ambassador, it rasped, its voice still weak. We must never underestimate them. Their resilience, it is not merely physical, it is an internal fortitude to endure everything, to transform pain into something else, something they call flavor or character. Valek nodded slowly, its violet glow now a deep, somber hue. It had spent cycles trying to categorize humanity within established galactic frameworks. Peaceful agriculturalists? Aggressive expansionists? Both. Neither. But now, after the food, after the sensory war culture, a terrifying new category emerged. Humans were asterisk experientialists. They didn't just survive. They lived every extreme, every sensation, every challenge, transforming it into a part of their bewildering, unbreakable spirit. Their food is a mirror of their existence, Valek stated, a grim realization settling in its core. A relentless, unpredictable assault of extremes. And they not only survive it, they enjoy it. They thrive on the very things that would break any other species. A silent vow passed between the Xylosian delegates in that sterile medical bay. A vow to study, to understand, but most importantly, a vow to asterisk respect the sheer, terrifying unpredictability of a species that found joy in a culinary diplomatic incident. Humanity, they realized, might be the most dangerous, most resilient species in the galaxy, precisely because they simply refused to die politely. Even on a plate, they would always ask for the extra spicy version and then laugh as you tried to comprehend their madness.